so much for joining us for the Q&A for Citizen Ash. We're here with the directors Sam Pollard and Rex Miller. Welcome, Sam and Rex.
Hello, Julia.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for being here. So to start things off, one of the reasons I love this film so much is that Arthur Ashe is shown not just as an incredible and groundbreaking athlete, but also as a strong fighter for racial equity and civil rights. And the film doesn't shy away from showing the nuance of his struggles and perspective. Can you both talk about what drew you specifically to Arthur Ashe's life and the importance of telling his story on screen now in 2021?
I'll let Rex go first and I'll pick up after. Go ahead, Rex.
Yeah, well, I'm the son of two tennis fanatics, so my tennis involvement started really young. I wound up making a film a few years ago about the great trailblazer Althea Gibson. That happened because my mother played her in 1958. My mom was Jamaican and grew up playing tennis in Jamaica and was a local New York player, and got to play in one of the big tournaments at the Marion Cricket Club, a restricted club outside of Philly. And that was a match between two brown-skinned women in their tennis whites. And that made an impression on me. That was my mom's little local claim to fame, losing badly to Althea. That film came out a few years ago, and I was contacted by someone that said, "Hey, I liked your Althea film. My father was a Life magazine photographer, and he shot Arthur for a week during the 1968 US Open. And we have 41 rolls of film that nobody's ever seen before from that week. And you should do a film about this." So one thing led to the next, and they sent me these beautiful photos, and it kind of led me to dig a little deeper. And 5.5 years later, there's this film, and I have this wonderful co-director, Sam Pollard. That's a whole journey as well. But that's the short version of my involvement.
And for me, I grew up in the 60s like Rex, knowing about Arthur Ashe and seeing him play in some, tennis tournaments. So I already knew who he was. And so almost a year and a half ago, his producers, Beth Hubbard and Anna Godis, reached out to me to sort of help Rex get the film over the finish line. And I knew Rex from before. We had worked together on some previous projects. And I wanted to make sure Rex was happy if I was going to get involved, and he was. And it's been a really good journey. I mean, it's always, as Rex knows, it's always complicated making these things, but we really succeeded. And I'm very pleased with how the film has turned out and the reception that it's gotten in the last few weeks.
Yeah. And I can add one little nugget to that. In 1968, I was 6 years old, and I was at the finals match of the US Open between Ashe and Acher. So I had a little personal connection to that.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. That's so great. And both of you have extensive backgrounds in documentary filmmaking. Was this the first time that you worked together on a project? And how was that process of collaboration, and what was your working dynamic like?
I can jump in. Yeah, I had shot some things for Sam before, and the process was, having somebody like Sam with his wisdom and all of his amazing achievements and his background as a professor. As soon as Anna and Beth, our producers, mentioned Sam possibly getting involved, I was like, that's very good for Arthur. For me, it was always about what's good for Arthur. So that was a total bonus. And, we went back and forth on some things. As a tennis guy, I was always pushing for maybe, let's get this match in, let's get that match in. But Sam was just really great at streamlining the absurd amount of material that we had, because we found a lot of interesting archival stuff. We found 30 hours of tapes of Arthur talking, and that became something that we both felt was important, that Arthur be the one telling his story. So it was a question of, how do you winnow this large amount of material down and make it coherent? And we weren't able to cover everything in his life. But hey, that's the way it goes.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I think that's exactly what the relationship was. We were able to dig into that audio archive, which was phenomenal, and to really sort of get the inner thinking of Arthur throughout the film, which was very important to do. And Rex is absolutely correct. He had amassed a large amount of material. And the process of documentary filmmaking is trying to figure out how to whittle it down and get it to be as succinct and engaging as possible, knowing that certain things might have to be sacrificed, So it was always a challenge, but Rex and I knew each other pretty well, and there's always the ups and downs in these relationships, but we had more ups than downs.
Great. And yeah, building sort of off of that, I'm wondering if your own perspectives and experiences brought up any conversations about representation or telling the history that were fruitful when developing the structure and the approach to the film.
Well, I don't think you could not do this without understanding that. Both of us are men of color, so we understood what Arthur was dealing with and going through. Rex even more than me because he's a real tennis player, and understanding what Arthur, as Rex used that term, the raisin in the rice pudding. Is that your term, Rex?
That's Arthur's term.
Arthur's term. That was a big challenge for Arthur to have to deal with that, at the time of during the turbulent 60s, and having to listen to people say, now you're an Uncle Tom, you're not being proactive enough. But as we learn in the film, he was a very proactive man, but he had to do it Arthur Ashe's way, not the way that Ali did it or Harry Edwards did it or Jim Brown. He had to do it Arthur Ashe's way.
Anything to add to that, Rex?
No.
Awesome. And as you mentioned in the film, you incorporated previously unheard audio tapes of interviews with Arthur Ashe from the early 80s. How did you get access to those tapes? And can you talk more about their significance in telling his story in the film?
Yeah, Arthur's personal archives are at the Schomburg Center, so in Harlem. So I spent several weeks up there going through all 47 boxes and found some amazing stuff. And one of the things I found was a transcript. It had to be about 1,000 pages. And at first I didn't even know what it was from, but it turned out to be a extended several weeks long interview between Arthur and the author Arnold Rampersad, who wrote the famous biography of Arthur called Days of Grace. So it was fascinating just to read it, and I was able to photograph the pages, but that only got us so far. So we actually reached out to Arnold Rampersad. Our archival producer Hannah Shepard took the lead on that, and she was a real hero. Finding Mr. Rampersad, who teaches at Stanford. He's not hidden away, and approached him. And he said, I have no idea where the tapes are, but I'll go look in my attic. And he did. And he called us a few days later that he had found the tapes and was happy to have us digitize them and, get them ready to get them retranscribed, because there were more tapes than even the original transcripts represented. And then, the rest is history. And some of the tapes were of varying quality, and it was the tapes were really interesting because it wasn't so much an interview; it was just an extended conversation that went on for weeks between Arthur and Arnold Rampersad. So that was a kind of a gold mine for this film, and it allowed us to have Arthur be the primary storyteller.
And what's really fascinating about that is that you're hearing Arthur give you basically his internal monologues about himself and how he feels about things, which is, when you can find material like that Rex found from Mr. Rampersad, that's gold, as he said, that's absolute gold. And I think, quite honestly, we both know that really helps frame this whole film and give it the kind of engagement that keeps people talking about this film now. Now that it's had its premiere and it's being screened everywhere.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There were a lot of times where different people were telling a story about Arthur, and then we were like, well, why don't we just have Arthur tell it?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Do you think those tapes will be released somehow else or just used in the film?
Oh, good question. They've been returned to copies to Jeannie, Arthur's wife, and then to obviously Mr. Rampersad. So I think it's kind of up to them where they go. Good question, though.
Yeah. And it seems that you've, Rex, in your past filmography, you've worked a lot with the theme of tennis, and then specifically on a virtual reality experience about Arthur Ashe a few years ago called Ashe 68. Can you talk a bit about that project? And was that a part of the inspiration for going more in depth into Ashe's life leading up to the 1968 US Open?
Yeah, the whole project kind of started as one project and then developed these different elements. And originally there was a goal to complete everything by 2018, the US Open. because that's the 50th anniversary of Arthur winning it. And then you know how doc films go. The doc film was still in progress, but we had gotten some funding to make this very, very cool virtual reality piece, a about 7-minute film in 360 that centered around Arthur's moment of winning the US Open. So we actually had a pro tennis player out there, Chris Eubanks, who's top 200 in the world and was All-American at Georgia Tech, and he really resembles Arthur Ashe. So we took over 50 people out to Forest Hills in Forest Hills, Queens, at the West Side Tennis Club, where Arthur won the US Open. And we wrapped a grass court with a 12-foot blue screen, and then reenacted match point with a $100,000 360 camera. And it was just, you know, a little over the top, but along with my co-director, Brad Lichtenstein, who's the VR expert, we pulled this thing off, and it wound up going to Sundance, and the US Open installed it for the 2018 US Open. So yeah, it's a kind of multifaceted project at this point, coming in over the finish line at different times.
And you know, it's interesting. I was out at the US Open in 2018, and I sat down and I watched and listened to the VR.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah, I did. I didn't even realize that you had done it. I mean, I think I saw the credits, but then I said, oh, you know, yeah, I saw it. I saw it in 2018. I was out there for a Serena Williams match or something.
And then the photos that kind of launched this whole project, the Zimmerman photos of John Zimmerman, who shot for Life magazine and Sports Illustrated for like 40 years. They were also involved with an exhibit at the same time at the Open with these 6-foot outdoor photographs. So anyway, there are all these little pieces of celebratory exhibit of Arthur.
Yeah, that's incredible. And Sam, did you have any previous experience or history with tennis, or was this project sort of your first entryway into the sport?
No, I'm a huge tennis fan.
Okay.
I've been a huge tennis fan for many, many years. I've followed the careers of, Djokovic and Roger Federer and Nadal and Serena and Venus. No, I've been to the US Open many times. I'm a big tennis fan. I mean, I play a little tennis. I've taken tennis lessons, but usually my sport was squash and racquetball, not tennis so much. But I'm a big tennis fan.
Each other?
I'm not going to play tennis against this guy.
Yeah, I'm still wrapped up in tennis. I still coach tennis, and I have daughters that play a little bit. And I can't. And I'm a weekend warrior with all my ex-college buddies. So yeah, I can't get away from it.
Yeah, that's awesome. You can tell because obviously there's a lot of, the film is very heavily involved in civil rights and overcoming prejudice, but there is, a lot of just focus on the world of tennis. And
let me just say this, and Rex is such a tennis person. He made sure that if we're going to have him playing, Arthur's going to play with a wooden racket as opposed to a metal racket, that the ball had to sound a certain way. I mean, that's how intense he was about the tennis being accurate.
Oh yeah, I had a lot of fun on eBay buying up vintage rackets and vintage clothes for our recre scenes as well. Yeah. So I have a small room full of that stuff.
That's awesome. Were there any, specific challenges or maybe magical alignments that happened while making the film, or maybe during post and the edit?
Well, Julie, there's always specific challenges when you make a documentary. I mean, you can't, that goes without saying. And the challenge always for all of us is to figure out how to overcome those challenges, be it, finding archival footage that might be too expensive, if that doesn't look great, and going back, try to find the source material. And we had Beth really on the case about that, or being able to make sure that, we reached out to a bunch of people to do some last minute interviews like McEnroe and Jeannie, and thank God they said yes. But a couple of other people we reached out to said no. So it's always challenges when you're making these things. It's an uphill climb all the way.
Yeah, I lobbied really hard for Jimmy Connors, and the first time we approached, he didn't say no, and then ultimately he did say no.
Right.
And I think that one of the challenges was early on, even before Sam came on, was what parts of his life to focus on and what to, you only have an hour and a half per se. So originally there was even larger focus on 1968. An original goal, like I mentioned, was to finish this by the 50th anniversary. So 1968 was this very important year, obviously, for all of America, but especially for Arthur. And then we got to a point where, well, you have to go, you can't make a film about Arthur Ashe and not chronicle going to South Africa. And you can't make a film and not show that he won Wimbledon. And then so it gradually expanded to include pretty much his whole life. Although not every single aspect of his life is in there, but that was just a big challenge. Like, where do you cut this off?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And was the film completed pre-pandemic or during? And has the era of COVID affected either of your filmmaking practices?
The shooting was like 95% done before COVID.
Yeah, right.
There were a couple of interviews at the end, McEnroe, and then a second interview with Jeannie that were done, via Zoom or virtual, but everything else was shot. And then it was just, Sam and an editor and back and forth by emails and notes. And so I didn't feel like it affected it that much.
And we finished, when we finished, like in August, right, Rex? August this year.
Yeah. But like the shooting, traveling around shooting wasn't a COVID issue.
Mm-hmm. Do you anticipate it affecting your future work, your documentaries coming up?
Well, I would say this. I mean, there's pluses and minuses of working virtually. I mean, one of the pluses is that you have an opportunity to sometimes, see many more cuts, because you don't have to walk to the editing room, or the editing room, the editor is not as close by as you want. I mean, with doing it virtually, the editor on this film was living in Brooklyn, so that wasn't too bad. But another film I had just finished right before this, my editor was in upstate New York, and she didn't come in because of the pandemic, but it worked out pretty well for us to be able to go back and forth looking at cuts virtually and giving her notes. So, there's its pluses and minuses. Do I prefer to sit in the edit room sometimes with the editor? Yes, but this is sort of the way things are now a little bit. I mean, some editors now don't want to go back in the edit room now. They want to work virtually. So it'll be a dance to figure out how to make that work.
Yeah. And I've been busier than ever shooting on other people's films. I'm a cinematographer, I say first. And I'm on the road now shooting and getting COVID tested every other day depending on the protocols for each different shoot. But yeah, somewhat back to normal, as normal can be.
Yeah, it's the same for me. I mean, I've been doing a lot of directing lately, and the last 3 months I've been on the road like every other week, and I think I've taken 15 COVID tests. I'm going to take one now in the next hour or so for a shoot this week. So yeah, it's sort of back to normal, but dealing with these new protocols now and procedures before you set foot on the set.
Definitely. And just to wrap things up, what projects do you both have coming up next and that you're working on?
Hey, Rex.
Well, I'm working on a film about a musician named Harley Flanagan, and you can just look him up. He's known as like a punk rock, New York City hardcore musician, and he's had a very interesting life. Leave it at that. And I've been shooting for the director Nancy Bursky on her very interesting film. I guess I can't talk about it, but yeah, those are two main things I'm working on besides Citizen Ashe rollout.
And I'm directing one of 5 directors on an HBO series about the Iran hostage crisis from 1979, which will probably come out next spring. And I'm also working as a director, sole director, on a 4-part series, 4-hour series, not 4 parts, 4 hours, about the legendary Boston Celtic Bill Russell. That'll be out on Netflix probably next fall.
Incredible. Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see your upcoming projects, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today. Yes, thank you. We've reached the end of the Q&A, but to our audience, please visit our website at best.afi.com for more opportunities to engage with us. We'd love to hear from you on social media using #AFIFest. Anything else to add?
Great to be here with y'all. Thanks.
It's a great honor to have the film being shown at the AFI Festival. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.